We'll start it with a special session, Silenced, the Rise of Internet Shutdowns in a Divided World. For today's panel, our speakers are Mr. ShameemReza, journalist, The Daily Star, Bangladesh; Mr. Leonardo Neves, researcher, International Intelligence Unit, Vargas Foundation, Brazil; Mr. ShameemReza, sir, Professor, Department of Mass Journalism and University of Dhaka, Bangladesh; Mr. David Patrician, journalist and international event moderator, Poland. I would like to request Mr. David Patrician to moderate this session, please. Thank you.
Good morning to my guests. Good morning to our audience. Just to make sure we're all awake, good morning.
Good morning.
Wonderful. Good to see you, and it's a great honor to be here with our distinguished panel, and for me at least, my first time in the country of Bangladesh. Just a brief introduction. My name is David Patrician, originally from the United States. I studied international politics in Washington and won a Fulbright Award, came to Germany, and now I'm a television host speaking in the German language for German media in Hamburg. It's a great honor to be here, and with our distinguished panels, we had the introduction, but I just wanted to one time very clearly say again who our guests are, and if you raise your hands just to make sure that everyone knows that. ShameemReza, who's a journalist with the Daily Star here in Bangladesh. We have Leonardo Neves. He is a researcher for the International Intelligence Unit at the Getulio Vargas Foundation in Brazil. And directly here to my right, we have Professor ShameemReza at the Department of Mass Communication and Journalism, University of Dhaka here in Bangladesh. Our topic that we'll be discussing today is Silence, the Rise of Internet Shutdowns in a Divided World. I'm sure most of you, of course, here in Bangladesh know all too well what it means when the internet is shut down for a few days. But this is a trend that's been happening for many years now around the world. Just a few to mention: in the Kashmir region of India, in Russia, in Myanmar, in Colombia, and as you all witnessed here a few months ago, here in Bangladesh. And that's where I wanted to start with my first question to ShameemReza. ShameemReza, if you could tell us a little bit, I know the people here from Bangladesh experienced it firsthand, but the question of really how it was to have a connected country. I researched over 75 million internet users here in Bangladesh, to be completely cut off, not just from communications, but from everyday work, from politics, I guess online banking, taxis. Could you just say a few words about how this shutdown was this past, I believe it was in August, please?
Yeah. Thank you. So first of all,
if you could, the microphone close so everyone can hear you good.
Yeah, first of all, currently the number of internet users in Bangladesh is 142 million. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Just
double. Yeah.
You mean recently, in the last couple of months, it just doubled?
No.
In the last few years?
For the last few years.
Okay, super.
Yeah. So 142 millions, that shows how much we are into the internet and the digital world. And this time, particularly from when the July movement started, we saw, if we particularly mention about the dates, that's July 15, when the things got out of hand of the government started to impose shutdowns, first on mobile internets, then on broadband networks, and on July 19, the situation worsened when the government announced emergency. So the situation was like there is an emergency in the country, and coupled with it is the internet shutdown. So you see the situation. The military was given the order to shoot at sight, and you don't have any means to communicate with your friends who are on the streets. They are demanding the kind of the quota reform, this kind of things. Also, people who are not into or not involved with the movements, they also suffered greatly, because currently almost 1 million freelancers in Bangladesh, which is one of the most of the young people, they are involved with this freelancing. So they were completely they could not continue their works during those 13 days. And also people who are mainly get information from the social media, because in the last 15 years, the media landscape changed badly, because most of the medias, they have to kind of listen to what the governments they try to propagate. And also there are some medias like the Daily Star, like the Pratham Alo, they sometimes report, but they could not report independently as they wanted to. So the social medias, those were the main medium for the people to get their information. So this time, during this shutdown, the government especially targeted these social media platforms. So there was a kind of complete blackout of information blackout. So that not only hampered the people who are in the streets, who are in the business, but also people who are also in the kind of like, there are also many kind of facilities, those are dependent on internet. So when the internet shut down, that affected everybody, be it the poor people, be it the businessmen, be it the students, be it the journalists. As a journalist, I must say that journalists who had to work and collect information from the field, they suffered a lot, and we already know that 6 journalists were killed during these shutdowns, and most of them had to go to the places, particularly in Rampura and Badda. Those places saw most violences, and since these journalists, they didn't have prior information what is going there, so they could not take the proper precautions, so they suffered a lot. And also many journalists, they were injured during this event. So it was a kind of nightmare that we saw during the July and the August. Yeah.
One question to you. So again, for me, it's very hard to even imagine having no connection, no internet for days, if not weeks. Did you see you're at the Daily Star? Did by any chance, the irony, more people go out and buy printed news because they didn't have access to digital news?
Yeah.
And can you tell me how
Of
the numbers
course,
are?
because all the print newspapers, they saw a spike in their sales, be it the Daily Star and be it the Pratham Alo. And particularly if we talk about the Daily Star, our regular circulation is 60,000, but that time we printed 1 lakh copies of newspapers. And also many people, they came to our office to buy a print copy, because there are no other sources like the mobile internet or other sources they can get information. Yeah.
And radio. Yeah. And radio.
And radio. Yeah.
Radio was
Yeah, okay, the radio and television, those were open, but they had to kind of publish those kind of things that the government permitted. And most of the media, the televisions, they kind of portrayed that the students who are protesting, they are vandalizing the government resources, they are anti-government, they are, so those they are criminal elements. Yeah.
Thank you. And just a reminder, after we have our small discussion, certainly we'll open up the floor for you all for questions and answers. Leonardo, when we spoke briefly this morning, you had mentioned about a case in Brazil where it was X, formerly Twitter, that was actually, I believe, turned off for 2 weeks in Brazil. Could you tell us a little about what that meant to the society and the reaction to that?
Yeah, it was an interesting case because the thing is that you probably know, U.S. has the 8th of January when people stormed the Capitol. We have that, unfortunately, too, on 6th of January, 3 years ago, I guess, when also protesters protesting against the election of the current President Lula, they invaded also the parliaments and the Supreme Court. And the thing is that most of the people that were storming the building and now all the prosecution that are behind it, they're still relying on the idea that what they did was right. I mean, there are some people, especially on the right wing of this political spectrum, that believe those people, they were doing lawful things. And most of these ideas come from fake news, misinformation, disinformation. And so the Supreme Court, within the process of prosecuting those people that were invading the Supreme Court and the parliaments, demanded Twitter to give information about some messages that were exchanged during that period, and also to block some profiles of people that were still spreading misinformation about what's happened there. So the thing is that Twitter's from now, X from Elon Musk, they refuse to either give information or to block any kind of profile. And Twitter has been, for a long time ago, one of the most recalcitrant social platforms, refraining to block any kind of profile, any kind of information, or removing information, even from situations that are criminal. I mean, there's a particular case that was spreads of pornography from children and everything. There's something like that. So, I mean, you have Instagram, you have Facebook removing contents, and Twitter said, okay, I'll not remove contents because it's within my bylaws, not removing nothing. So it's completely free platform. So, I mean, there was a growing thing against Twitter in the sense that they were not cooperating with the law. So the Supreme Court judge decided that, okay, Twitter, so you're going to receive some fines for not doing that, for not blocking the content and not removing those, not giving information, not removing those profiles. Twitter then removed the representative from Brazil. So there is nobody representing Twitter in Brazil, so nobody to receive the letter from the Supreme Court. So that's the time that the Supreme Court decided to block Twitter. And then they blocked, in fact, Twitter for almost 2 weeks until Twitter decided to let it go. They paid their fines, block the profiles, and provide the information given. And what's kind of amazing, because there was no major protest. I mean, people somehow, of course, most people from the right side of the political spectrum was very dissatisfied. They complained a lot in other media platforms. But there was no movement. People didn't go to the streets. I mean, not much people, I mean, stopped to work. Because again, it's true, a lot of people in the formal sector are using social media platforms to work, but they have other platforms to transit. I mean, they have a lot of people working in Twitter, yes, but they could move to Instagram more easily. They could go to TikTok and somehow manage to get on with their lives. People are affected. I'm not saying that, but it was surprisingly interesting that parts of the population was with the Supreme Court. Okay, those guys cannot do whatever they want in our country. There is a limit to that. Rules are important, and I would like to talk about that a little bit later. But it was, I mean, I think the lack of, how can I say that? Impact on the society. I mean, the lack of people supporting Twitter on the streets made Twitter take a step back and then capitalize.
Okay. And since we're talking about Twitter, now X, but both are fine, I wanted to ask you about a case, of course, in the United States. It's no secret. Elon Musk donated over $100 million to the campaign of now re-elected President Trump. And any of you, of course, can answer, but first to Leonardo. And there's no secret also now that he's very, very close to Donald Trump in the last few months. Maybe we'll have a position officially or unofficially. What do you think that is for the health of information? Because a lot of times still we don't know, at least I don't know, these algorithms, you know, what they put out, and people are saying that the last few months of the Trump campaign, X became almost like a pseudo propaganda platform for the Republican Party. Your thoughts on that?
And it is. I think that's one of the things I think it's important to talk about rules. I follow very closely US and US politics and also US elections. And the thing is, US elections is one of the elections that has least rules possible. I mean, they have so many different norms in so many different states and counties. So it's difficult to have a national rule to regulate internet there. So, I mean, it's like a Wild West in some sense. And I think that the issue about Twitter is paramount here to understand how regulations needed to organize how we interact with internet, because rules regulate not only people, regulates also governments. So give a limit to what the government can do. It surprised me when Elon Musk bought Twitter. Most of the journalists and economists was thinking about the business side of the thing, how bad it was afterwards, how bad was the business, how banking were losing money or preoccupied that they're going to lose money because the share value of Twitter collapsed, I mean, up in half or something like that. And some political scientists, I was among them, are saying, this guy is not buying Twitter for money. I mean, this is not a regular business. He's not buying like a Coca-Cola factory. This is a platform, this is a tool. And I think that we saw that in the election. I mean, the way that Twitter favors Donald Trump's election was something beyond acceptable in most democratic countries. I use Twitter a lot for following this kind of situation, and I'm very careful about liking the same amounts of information from different candidates. While people was looking to Twitter, the Twitter situation.
I think we're back now.
Your voice. Okay. So just to close, I think while we had to think about the internet and social media in a different way, I mean, that's impacting our society in a completely different manner. While economists and journalists were thinking about the Twitter business from the perspective of money, Elon Musk was hacking the system, and he managed to win an election. I mean, he was a powerful tool to Donald Trump to win an election, and that's powerful to understand how the private sector also can impact society. So I think that we have new regulations, careful design regulations, to constrain access from both governments and the private sector.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. Now we have our professor, Shameem. Pleasure to meet you from the University of Dhaka. I had two questions. One, we were discussing this morning about the BTRC Act. I wanted to ask a little bit about that and the power that it gave the government to basically shut off the internet and the social media. And then a second follow-up question. You're dealing with young students, of course, at the heart of the demonstrations a few months ago, but also the effects of social media on young people, your opinion, the pros and the cons. And then I'll get to another point in another country, please.
Two things, I think. To start with the laws or the provisions that allows the government to shut down the internet. There are old laws, there are new laws. There are some laws which have nothing to do with the internet or the digital world. Some of them were enacted many, many years back or even decades back.
Oh, okay.
But for example, the penal code provision that you mentioned given to police, that police can, declare many of the things. It can not order, but can suggest to shut down internet, can, prevent from gathering somewhere, from protesting somewhere. So meaning that the traditional laws of the penal courts can also be used to shut down internet, as well as there are the newer laws. Bangladesh Telecommunication Regulatory Authority has got a number of, the laws and provision in its hand. That can also help you, block or slow down or shut down the internet. But the thing is that sometimes it's not very clear who is giving the order and on what ground. Is it on the basis of the BTRC law? Is it the penal courts, for which police can do this or police can order this? Is it the Prime Minister's office? Is it the Ministry of Home Affairs? Even if it is the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, who is actually suggesting? Who is giving the order to do this?
That's a very important question.
It happened even after the July uprising. Although it's on a different note, that no one knows who ordered the police to shoot. And, this is surprising. Everybody said, I didn't do that. Maybe the magistrates did, maybe the police did, maybe, some higher-ups did. So there is a kind of mess up. But I think the most important thing is that the government lied to its people. So it threatened the very basic principles of democracy. It's a breach of agreement. It doesn't matter what kind of law you have in place. In the global south, we have, very different kind of laws. We don't have any, kind of provision like the United States have got in the First Amendment that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of press. And the press is in a greater sense that might include internet as well. But in this country, we have guarantee. You have Article 39, and that says you have the right to, convene, you have right to protest, you have right to express yourself. It's quite very modern, very up-to-date kind of thing. It was adopted in 1972. So many, many years after the US Constitution is adopted.
Right after Bangladesh was established, 1 year afterwards.
1 year afterwards. That is a great achievement. But again, there were a number of restrictions with Article 39, that you can do that. You have the right to, the freedom of expression, but with a reasonable restriction. Some of the restrictions are very wide open. Now, still you can use that, based on the constitutional provisions. That, I give you right to use internet, to use social media platforms or anything, but I also have got the right because you are not doing the right thing. So during any upheaval, political protest, mass uprising, even in case of civil disobedience, I can use that. So it doesn't matter what kind of provision BTRC is having. So I would say that it's a breach of agreement. If you look at it from democracy point of view, the government lied to its people. The then minister responsible for this said there was a fire incident somewhere. So we are repairing it. We have to fix it in order for for us to deliver the internet services, which is not right. It was a deliberate attempt to shut down internet, meaning they're denying your rights. As a UN declaration, you have a right. It's a universal right of access to internet. You can use that. Nobody can really stop that, and nobody can shut it down. So they are denying your universal right. They're denying your basic human rights. They're denying the rights that's given in the Constitution, despite there are reasonable restrictions here. It affected government service deliveries, the regular service deliveries. So it's a combination of legal provisions, and as well, I would say we don't have any protection. Like you do have in the United States and many, I'm not sure if many other countries have got, but at least some protection that government cannot do that.
In theory.
In theory, we'll be talking, I'm sure about it in conclusion, in theory, but there are some attempts. But in this country, we don't have any such attempt to do that. Yes. So either you have a law or you protest. There is nothing in between that you need some kind of protection. that at least you can negotiate with the government, you can talk to the government. So your internet rights are denied, your democratic principles are been breached, the government lies to you. So I think it's somewhere not very important what kind of legal provisions or the policies are in practice, but it is how you look at the practice of internet, how you look at your right to have access to internet, how the government looks at your right to receive, to process and impart information, through online platforms or the digital, the means.
Thank you very much. Let me jump in, and I have a question for all of our panelists. So I recently saw that the country of Australia passed a law, or they actually passed it, and they will try to enact it in a few months, to ban children under 16 years of age to use any kind of social media. So no social media by law of the land for children under 16. They're still discussing how they can actually implement this. It's very tricky. You talked about the universal rights of people to be able to go onto the internet, including information, social medias. Children's a different thing. I wanted to ask maybe just your reaction about that for children under 16. And I'll start with you, Professor, since you're dealing, university students are, of course, older. And then we'll just go right down the line.
Sure.
Just a few sentences.
I mean, there are different approaches. In Australia, approach is like parental control, and it's a moral obligation. In many of these countries, like again I say in Bangladesh and many of the countries in the global south, we don't set any principle in the first place. Without setting any principle, we try to go for enacting laws and adopting number of policies. In Australia, there are a number of flows, and there are different waves. It's a parental control, it's a moral obligation, it's
But
a
I'd
state
like to hear
responsibility.
in general, if you think it's a good idea or bad, consequences, pros or cons.
I think there are good and there are also bad. For example, Bangladesh doesn't have any restriction. I mean, anyone can become YouTuber. Even you will find that the elementary school, girls are also YouTubers. I've experienced that. And asking for my internet ID, and I said, how come you don't have that? I mean, why should I give it to you? Because I'm a YouTuber. So I have got the right to get your, email IDs or whatever thing. So there is no restriction here. Now, there are two schools, obviously. I mean, either to allow them, whatever thing you want to do, so you will learn, you will filter. I think, I don't want to call it restriction, but some kind of regulatory system might be there, which can protect children. I mean, by children, again, you have to define whether 18 years of age is also children. I mean, I can't tell a university graduate, a fresher, not to use the internet platform.
Okay.
So there can be some kind of self-regulatory mechanism. Parents can be a vital stakeholder here. The schools can play a vital role. But I'm not in favor of restricting, someone's access to the internet and not giving the right, for good causes. But
I love your optimism, but self-regulatory,
Right.
I've seen a lot of things, doesn't usually
Thank
work,
you.
although it's an honorable cause.
Right.
But that's just my opinion.
But I before that, Australia and New Zealand had got this, I would say, some kind of strangest approaches in relation to responding to pornography,
Yes.
Access to very obscenity or adult content, as well as to internet. So I don't think this Australian example would be quite relevant to many other countries living in this part, although that's a very good one. I mean, Australia has got a fantastic provisions to allow its people to have access to the internet.
Yes.
But again, on the other hand, if you look at the provision of Child Rights Convention under UNCRC, that it is also that state's moral obligation. It's the moral obligation of the society and duty bearers to make sure that children have got access to the appropriate content and they're not exposed to the harmful content. So if internet provides them access to the useful content, then it's really important for the children's upbringing, for education, even for the youngsters. It's a matter of day-to-day affairs. I mean, I find everydayness in the internet use, but Australian example should be analyzed and should be, it's very contextualized. So without understanding the context, we shouldn't generalize and take it as a universal principles or practice.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Professor, the same question to Leonardo, just in general.
Yes.
Doesn't have to be only for Australia. In general, young people, age limits when it comes to social media.
Very briefly, I don't have an answer. I mean, truly, because I'm a liberal from the political spectrum, from political sense. I mean, so I like to refrain prohibiting things in general. And I do think that it's a kind of law, sorry, it's a kind of law that's very difficult. I mean, it's not feasible, in my opinion, to enact it. I mean, how can you block perfectly? I mean, you block the phones of youngsters. I mean, you prosecute the parents that allow it, how you can prove it. I mean, it's kind of difficult to do that. And again, I do think that social media has also its merits. I mean, it's addictive, of course, but it can create connection with more people. We can create connection with people outside the country, outside the city. Perhaps you can try to make some different kind of regulations that, for instance, block some kinds of content, that forbid some kinds of propaganda, specifically, let's say, I mean...
Use of specialized software.
Yes, and you have to go on education. I mean, have to make a blitz on education. A blitz on education in the sense of schools. Schools have to, and that's, I mean, we have to have begun doing that like 10, 12 years ago, but schools have to have a class of history, has to have class of geography, math, and social information or something like that, communication or whatever. People has to understand what is misinformation, the difference between misinformation and disinformation, what's fake news, I mean, the responsibility that people have, how to engage in sharing news, but that's something that we can act, that can help. And also, you can also do something like we did in Brazil in terms of cigarettes. You when you have the package of cigarettes, you have a photograph on the back or the kind of disease that you can have.
Also in Germany.
Also in Germany. So many countries don't have that. So, I mean, that's somehow interesting enough, creates an impact on society, and people, I mean, more or less stop a little bit. So there are some, in my opinion, some campaigns that you can do that can reduce the harms that social media are doing to people. We have to, again, have to get a bunch of experts, lock in a room and come up with some of these bright ideas. I'm not one of them, but I would refrain to block, refrain to prohibit, and try to create something that's more comprehensive and perhaps durable.
20 seconds, please, Professor.
It's 20 seconds. I think that's the reason we suggest media information and digital literacy. I mean, instead of prohibiting them, I mean, you can teach them the skills. You can tell them the pros and cons. I mean, this is a matter of education as well. It's a matter of socialization as well. Unless you give them the opportunity to engage with other sections, other aspects, other layers and dimensions of the society, I mean, you cannot, solve the problem by prohibiting their access. And so I think the information literacy could be one way out that, which depends on not only on history, but not only on skill, but also your self-understanding of what to do and not to do.
So let me ask you, and also to ShameemReza, media literacy, digital literacy, is that even something in the school systems here in Bangladesh right now? It's a big discussion in Germany, and it's not part of the curriculum.
Okay, not yet. But there are some discussions that these things should be kind of taught in the schools, at least at the college or university level. So that is the situation here. And I want to highlight that as a journalist, I am against all forms of restrictions on internet. I want to promote responsible use of internet. I think Sir also have emphasized on that topic. And also, if we look at this time during the July and August revolution, how the young people, even who are below age 16, how they use the internet. They use the internet very positively. Even when the state medias or mainstream medias, they were propagating false news. These students, young people, they are kind of providing the real-time news, and they are correcting those media propagandas. So the young people in Bangladesh, they have already proved that they are aware of the importance of internet and how it has to be used responsibly. I think that is very positive, and we have to kind of build on that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Finland has already something in the education system that regards to digital literacy.
They're one of the pioneers and
Yeah.
leading in this.
Finland or Sweden? I think it's Finland.
I have
Broadband is universal, right?
a question on our panel. Of course, we're dealing with internet shutdowns, and the government is usually all-powerful. But when a government does choose to shut down the internet for a country, what are the responses? I guess I would start with my Bangladeshi guest, because you just lived that, how is it? And we talked, you had mentioned this morning a very interesting point. It's
Right.
not only that you have the loss of communication with friends or even business, but you have a loss of identity towards your community and even your country. So what are the options if the internet is turned down? This time only a few days or a few weeks, but even more so.
I think, when internet shutdown took place, the young generation or those who are very actively engaged with the uprising, they found the alternatives. I mean, they had some other ways to, find another way to have access to the internet. But that's not the solution always. I think one of the things we need some kind of law or legal provision as protection, that we must put pressure on the government. So we need campaign, we need advocacy, we need lots of lobbying with the government. with the lawmakers, with the policymakers, that some kind of protection should be given, that government cannot do this, without, reasons are again, there should be reasons behind reasons, yes. But they cannot do it so deliberately to crack down something, to crack down protest, to silence the opposition voices, and to silence the dissent. I mean, they cannot do that. Also, in order for us to do that, we need the regional and international collaborations. I mean, UN is doing it. UN is repeatedly urging its member state not to do that. It has already declared it. I think it's 2003 or 4 the WSI. I'm not sure. Yeah, and that it's a universal right. And the Finland declared broadband many years as universal human rights. I mean, everybody should have access to that. There's no question of shutting it down. So I think it's a legal provision should be there. There should be some kind of protection that the government cannot do that. There has to be some regional agreement in that. We have SARC, which is South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation, which is kind of defunct right at the moment, but the current government is talking about reviving it and making it more active. They should have more discussions on this at the regional level, because there are bigger players in the region, like India is there, Pakistan there, Bangladesh here. And the internet shutdown incidents are happening everywhere. In India, there was an internet shutdown in Kashmir for longer period of time. It has happened in Bangladesh. That really affected our understanding of governments, our relationship with the government, our understanding of the free flow of information, the very basic communication patterns. I mean, the first time we really faced a situation, what it is like, without internet in a digital world. And it is happening in Myanmar. I mean, that has been weaponized against the Rohingya people. So I think some kind of regional collaboration, understanding is necessary in order for us to, come up with a treaty or any kind of thing, that the member states or the governments will not do that very easily. And even if they want to do that, it has to be, brought it down to a minimum level, to a reasonable level, if there is any security situation. I mean, it can always happen. And I remember one of my experiences. I was in a technical meeting of BIMSTEC. It's a multilateral cooperation thing. And I personally propose that we should talk about that, how we can, keep it at the minimum level, the internet shutdown thing, and we don't use it as a tool, we use it as a weapon. One of the very powerful countries in South Asia say, no, you cannot do that. We don't agree with adopting any such, common policy, because it is up to the member state to, decide what to do and not to do. And at the international level, I'm sure it was in the economic forum, it was discussed. Internet, shutdown issues. Yes, so I think we should have an international agreement, some kind of, if not a treaty, that the democracies will not do this.
Again, I love the optimism, but working in Washington, D.C., when you see that the countries go into the agreements and go out, depending on which administrations.
Then we need a strict provision. Strict provisions. Okay.
Leonardo, thank you for your thoughts, Professor. Leonardo, I know you said you're also very big on rules, regulations. Would you like to share a few thoughts?
Yeah, I think that when you think about it, when expect, in the heat of the moment, in general, we expect sometimes that what the international community will do to help us and everything else. The problem that I think that we have to sometimes take a step back and think, do we like when international actors or other countries intervene in our country? In general, no. In general, no. Unless we like, unless this specific situation, we think that they should do that. The problem is that that's great precedence to other situations. And today I might be okay with that. I might even desire that. But tomorrow, that might go against my interest. So I do think that's, again, to call for any kind of international intervention. Intervention not mean military. I mean, condemnation. I mean, could be condemnation. Could be even more forcefully sanctions or whatever. It's necessary some kind of parameters, some triggers that we can identify. That's when that happens. Some actors can have a given response, and you gave the way to that. I mean, you have to have some kinds of agreements, regional agreements, international agreements, or bilateral agreements with countries. Put something on the paper that creates a roadmap to what to do, when to do, what are the trigger, what are the response. Because otherwise, we are opening ourselves to a precedent that we do not like to have it in the future.
Please,
thanks.
ShameemReza.
Yeah, so if this discussion happened before the...
Just closer to you.
Yeah.
Go, thank you.
So if this discussion happened before the July Revolution, I would have started with that Bangladeshi people need to be made aware of the internet rights, internet freedom, digital rights. But these events have already taught people the importance of digital rights and online freedom. So now we are in the process of kind of creating pressure on the government that, okay, we need robust digital freedom. And for that matter, there are ample international regulations like in 2022, UN, they clearly made a guideline if a country or a state has to clamp internet shutdown, they have to follow 6 principles. And the main principles of that, the government have to make clear why they are clamping internet shutdown and for how long. And even that process has to have the option of judicial review, or also there should be some body that if a government, just a particular minister or a particular ministry even the prime minister, if he or she wants to impose shutdown, he or she should not have the opportunity, because there should have certain kind of bodies like the judicial bodies who would review those decisions. Yeah. And also there are important kind of judicial decisions, particularly in India also, and also in Bangladesh they are in the process. And also there is a thing that the internet providers, they have the kind of responsibility according to the UN document, because when the government, they give you the order that, okay, you have to shut down internet for this time or that time, the internet providers have the responsibility to resist those attempts, because those kind of things are guaranteed by the international treaties or international arrangements. And also finally, as ShameemReza sir has said, that the internet penetration in Bangladesh, different international partners are involved in the process of developing the internet infrastructure in Bangladesh. So the development partners, they have a kind of responsibility like to say the government that, okay, we are providing you support to kind of expand the internet networks, but you can't do or impose the internet shutdown as you will and as when you think. Yeah, so these kinds of arrangements, I think, will kind of safeguard the digital rights of Bangladeshi people.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open up to Q&A, but before we do that, one quick question for you, just for you, ShameemReza. We have a lot of young people here, and you're at the Daily Star. 2 or 3 sentences for anyone here considering a future in journalism, and for the Bangladeshis here, of course, in the country. 2 or 3 words that you would give them. Optimistic, what should they do? Maybe not.
Of course, because these July revolution, they have proved that, like earlier in several events I have attended, there was a kind of like citizen journalism.
Yes.
But in Bangladesh, that didn't go that much way. But this time we saw hundreds of citizen journalists. And that was really very optimistic for us journalists. And also the young people, they have showed that, like there are several incidents, as I have already mentioned, that mainstream medias, they provided false informations. But the citizen journalists, but the young people, they have corrected those wrong propagandas. Yeah. So I think we have a very optimistic situations, and many people, they are also into journalism, and after particularly these July revolution, many people, they are also actively in the citizen journalism, and many of them will, I think, will be a great journalist for Bangladesh. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. It's my first breakout session here, so I don't know the protocol. I don't see a microphone, so I'll just step down. If you have a question, please raise your hand. And I see the gentleman here, and always there we have a microphone. Ah, okay, wonderful. Please go ahead.
My question is to Mr. Leonardo.
And nice and loud.
Should there be any regulation on Twitter or Telegram that governments can initiate, or should it be free from government control and let to run wild, even with criminal activities going on, especially with the arrest of Telegram CEO recently?
And that was for the professor here?
I'm sorry, Leonardo.
Please go ahead.
Do you wish to collect some more questions to make more efficiency?
I like to go
Oh, okay, no problem.
My experience.
No problem.
Yes.
For sure, you have to have regulations. I mean, again, there are some things that are happening there are some kind of criminal activities that use some of these loopholes and gaps that some platforms provide. For instance, there was a case in Brazil also that was happening beginning of 2021, I guess, on people selling drugs and selling weapons on Telegram. And Telegram was completely free. Again, I'm not sure, it was not the Supreme Court, I think it was done at different courts. But again, the judiciary try to go after them because, I mean, the federal police has huge amounts of evidence showing that the Telegram was perhaps the major channel of some kind of criminal gangs trafficking drugs and arms. So I mean, you have to go to the Telegram and say, okay, I want those profiles, I want those information because I have to get those people. So yes, I do think that they have to have some kind of regulation. Again, I'm a liberal, so in the sense that I think that the regulation has to be very carefully designed. It should not affect privacy, should not affect my ability to communicate with people. If I want to send a message to my colleague here, I can send any kind of message, providing is not a criminal activity, to him, and then know that nobody's reading and everything else. So I think that we have to have, again, to close my arguments, careful design regulation that's only the higher stance of the judicial courts has the ability to, in very specific situations, go to the platforms or internet providers and then request then information, block contents, remove contents, or something like that. So yes, I do think that some regulation is not good, it's necessary, it's mandatory.
Professor, I see you taking notes here next to me. Would you like to do one or two sentences to that as well? And then the next question will be the young lady in the front.
I think this is the time that government makes law to restrict its citizen. But it is the time that we should restrict the government. So we should call for those regulations that you cannot do this. This is a right. It's very different because in the past it's regulated, it controlled all traditional media. Shut down newspapers, shutting down television stations, shutting down radio station, all sorts of things. But in the digital world, you cannot do that. So I am restricting you. So there can be some protection, some legal provision that you cannot do that. Number two, you cannot criminalize my activity. I mean, the digital world activity should not be criminalized. I mean, unless it's a criminal attempt to do that, that's a very different thing. Like he mentioned that selling weapons, doing illegal things. I mean, that's completely a different discussion. But you cannot criminalize my activities. You cannot criminalize my views, like when I'm doing something. So I think it's a time that it's a new civic rule that we should have a new treaty, like the Magna Carta, for example. When Magna Carta happened, I mean, you might say, oh, this is something extraordinary referring to Magna Carta. This is the digital world. The human civilization didn't experience this in its 10,000 years, whatever it has been going on. So we should have a social contract. We should have a new Magna Carta with the government that I have the digital right. You cannot criminalize all the activities all on a sudden, and you cannot really restrict my right here. So I'm going to restrict you. I mean, that should be the call of that.
It's a hot issue in the United States because they say the freedom of expression, of course, freedom of speech, but then if you have hate speech that leads to violence, then where do you draw the lines? But
we are always drawing the line, obviously. I mean, there is a clear line of demarcation between your freedom or your right to expression and as well as when you are circulating or distributing the hate speech. I mean, it's both. It's both self-regulatory, it's both societal responsibility, as well as obviously government has a responsibility to regulate, to intervene, and to look into it. But again, you will have to define which one you are leveling as hate speech. If I'm talking against you, I'm criticizing the government activities, and you turn that as hate speech, then I have a point to raise here. But if it's a really hate speech against ethnicity and it's a religious belief against your sexual orientation, then obviously as a citizen, as a government, as a regulator, we have to intervene.
Excellent. Thank you for your points. To our next question.
So my question is addressed towards ShameemReza, and other panelists could add as well. So am I more audible now? Yes. So my question is, for the last 15 years, the major electronic and print media has been politicized by the previous government. And also often we have seen that the Daily Star, Pratham Alo and other print media also complied with the government because to have some certain leverages. So when a new government comes in after the election, so being a journalist in Daily Star, and also the same goes for other print medias as well, print and electronic medias as well, how do they protect themselves not to fall victim of the same pattern? So when another government comes in and the same situation happens and they pressurize you not to actually disclose information and use you as a weapon of propaganda, so how do you protect yourself and how do you be true to yourself being a journalist and the media houses?
Thank you for the question. Please.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, of course, it is important for the newspapers to kind of utilize the new freedom they have gained to do their true journalism. But the problem that although we have kind of removed a government, Awami League government, but the nature of the state that has remained largely same. Just one example, as we are discussing about the internet shutdown, on September 21, there was a kind of clash in our hill tracks in Khagrachori area, Dighinala area. And after that, there were 2 consecutive days where internet shutdowns, mobile shutdown, internet shutdowns were clamped. And we didn't expect that because we have just seen how the government used the internet shutdown during the July and August revolution. So we didn't expect that the government of Dr. Yunus, he will do the same thing. But it happened because even as I said, that Awami League, they have lost power, but the state, the deep state, they haven't lost the power. And we know the situation in the CHT. So we saw the repeated events of internet shutdown and the same kind of arguments. Because if you look at the event of July and August, the BTRC, who regulates the internet, they said that, okay, there was no order from the government to internet shutdown. And those events were mainly happened due to the burning of the data centers in Mohakhali. And this time also, after the September 21 incident, the government said that, BTRC said that there was no kind of pressure from the government or any rule from the BTRC for internet shutdown. So that kind of things are continuing. So unless we change the nature of the state, we can't say that, okay, we are now freedom, we now have the freedom, or we now can do what we want to do in the digital world. And also another important thing that these medias, particularly the Daily Star and Pratham Aala and the mainstream medias, they have largely turned into a corporate media. So they have corporate interest and they don't cover certain kind of things like the rate of mobile internet in Bangladesh is very high. If you compare with the India, our
Please microphone closer.
Yeah, compare with India. But our medias, the Daily Star, Pratham Aala and other mainstream media, they will not report on these events or these irregularities because they get large amount of ads from these mobile companies. So these are fundamental problems. Unless we change this situation, we can't expect better situation. Yeah,
Great, thank you very much. We have about 3 or 4 minutes left. I see 2 or 3 more questions. I'll tell you what, 2 questions, but they have to be short questions, short answers. We'll start with the gentleman in the back, and the lady here will have the last one. Please, go ahead. Microphone there. And I don't want to be rude, but they have to be short, and on our panel, they have to be short answers too. Please.
Yeah, very short question. Thank you very much. My name is Stephen Kovacs. I'm from the Agency for Open Culture in Berlin and Ottawa. These internet shutdowns are always very, very blunt tools, right, to control population, civil society, and so on. But they also affect, of course, the economy, right? All kinds of investment. In Bangladesh, has there been like a reaction from the business community that the government shoots itself in the foot when it does this in terms of their entire economic development? Is that part of the debate here as well?
Great question. Business community, what's their reaction been when the internet is completely shut down for days at an end?
So just for example, the total banking process, it was affected worstly after the internet shutdown. But the business persons, they have requested the government that, okay, you keep the internet shutdown for other people, but give us a special privilege. So it is the reality of the Bangladesh. So they always ask for a special privilege. They are okay with the internet shutdown across the country for general people, but they want a special privilege. And also the government, they complied with their request and they started the process of like the business community, they can have special banking channels so they can continue their businesses. So that's the situation. Yeah.
Yes.
Just quick response.
But really quick, I'm sorry to cut the time.
So that opens up the channel really for the hacktivists to get into the banking system, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There is one thing that's very, very quickly. Of course, that happened in many different places. That's of course when you shut down internet or some platform, there is some backlash from different actors that you're not supposed to attack. But the thing is, internet blackout is a very extreme measure. And when a country is doing that, because it's few, a government, it's few that's going to existential threats. So if it's believed that it's going to cease to exist. So in that sense, I mean, the blackout, it's whatever is the business community is going to cry out someday. I mean, you lower your head, take the heat, try to meddle, to cope with the rebellion, the insurgency, whatever, and then you go to create some kind of goodies to give to them. Okay, I'm sorry, but it was necessary because it was existential threats.
Excellent. Thank you. For the very final question, I want to keep my word. Can we have the microphone to the young woman here, right in the front? It's coming to you. Final question and final answer, please.
Okay. Hello. Hi, I'm Zaina. I'm a development professional. So my question is to Shameem sir, or any other panelists can answer. So as now we are in the path of reforming, what should be done with the Cybersecurity Act, which was formerly known as Digital Security Act? I know there has been a talk to, annul the law, the total law, or to scrap it. But my question is that necessary, or we should make amendments with the law act? Thank you.
I mean, we're already fed up with laws. In the 80s and 90s, we wanted more laws. We thought that will give a better protection, better environment. Now we are pissed off with it. I mean, we say no more laws and provisions. But we need cybersecurity laws, not the one that currently we have. We need to protect our business, our security, our privacy, and many other things online. I'm in favor of, in the past, like I advocated that we can amend it and we can do with these critical provisions. There are non-billable provisions in there. But right at the moment, I think the consensus is that we should, cancel this or to scrap it totally, I mean, in its current condition. But we'll need some kind of cyber law, but not to, control its people, not to have the provision which doesn't allow you bails and give kind of unchecked, authority to the police and agency to do that. So you have to make a balance, I think, that as Sajan says, that we should talk more about, particularly from the young generation. We should raise our voice for a better governance. I mean, the deeper state should not play a role here. I think the non-state actors should be so powerful in sometimes encouraging the government to do this. And my final word would be the internet shutdown, if required, should be an extreme measure, extreme and rarest kind of thing, to happen in any democracy. It should not be a tool to happen, off and on that I can do that. And we are not Iran, for example. When it was happening in Iran, United States companies tried to intervene, tried to provide them the alternative means. I mean, we don't want that, as well as he also mentioned that. So we want a better political culture. We want our rights to be respected, and we want our government to realize that this is a digital world, this is our right, and this is our human rights, once and not for all. Thank you.
Excellent question, excellent closing words. I'd like to take a moment on behalf of everyone here at the Bay of Bengal Conversation to thank our three distinguished guests, ShameemSudDoza, Leonardo Neves, and Professor ShameemReza. Please give them a warm welcome, or thank you, excuse me.